Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new Community Live Lounge session. Today, I have a very special guest with me and special Mac speaker, Will MacNeil from The Mill. I want to
Thanks.
say a big hello to Will. How are you doing?
I'm really well, Natalie. Thanks. It's really good to be here.
Yeah, it's so good to
Quite.
have you. I also want to say hello to our live community watching us live right now. And a quick reminder, if you are watching us on YouTube, you can still jump over to max.adobe.com on the community tab so we can answer your questions and you can join the live chat. You can also join behance.net/live. So you have three platforms, but if you want to join the chat, to join us on the Max website. And it's day 3, it's Max. It has left us super inspired, excited, and ready to create more than ever. And I know we have just a short time, and I can't wait to talk about everything that Will shared with us in his yesterday's session. Will, I'm gonna have you introduce yourself. I don't want to spoil everything, so please go ahead.
Well, I'm Will MacNeil, and I work for The Mill in London. And The Mill is a big visual effects and creative studio. Been around for a long time. Kind of made their name doing big visual effects for films like Gladiator, and then got more and more into doing commercials. And I think that's probably what they're best known for now is making commercials, big ads you see on things like the Super Bowl, Christmas ads here, the kind of big budget stuff. But I'm not really into that stuff as much. I'm more in kind of the conceptual projects that we do, motion design projects, smaller advertising stuff, and now actually more into experiential work. So interactive projects, things like you might see a large display or something in a museum, and trying to get into things that are, a bit more kind of adventurous that way. My history, though, is I was actually, for a long time ago, I was an editor. For a little while, I was an assistant film editor. So I worked on some feature films like Billy Elliot stuff. And then I kind of shifted from editing into graphics, into what's now called motion graphics, but back then was actually just called graphics.
Yeah.
and and kind of took a bit of a leap and got into doing graphics for documentaries, and then kind of shifted from that into commercials. And that's how I ended up where I am now.
Amazing. And talking about the personal side of Will, we have a question here from Antonio. If you can just share some of your influences, such as artists, book, any designers that you want to recommend for inspiration.
I mean, I tend to look at kind of elsewhere for most of my inspiration. I think my biggest inspiration for anything is the outside world, the outdoor world, nature. I spend a lot of time at the beach here in the UK. I'm fascinated with the way light works and the way light moves across natural landscapes. I'm very much into landscape painting, like the Hudson River School of painters from quite a long time ago in America. I used to live in Colorado. I'm quite inspired by big epic landscapes and sort of dramatic spaces. Um, as far as designers go, I'm quite into the sort of generative scene, people like Joshua Davis and that lot, who are kind of, using code to create imagery and that sort of thing. And and then I love films because I used to work in them. So I spent a lot of time, or used to spend a lot of time in the movies, not so much anymore. But I really am quite just fascinated with innovative visual storytelling.
Yeah, yeah, and you do talk about that in your session. And before we jump into the storytelling piece, I also wanted to talk about your first animation that you created that actually launched your career as a 3D artist. I'm sure that we are all curious to hear about, your development ever since you created the animation for Amnesty International and until you joined the mill. If you can just share your insights on that one and how it made you feel.
Yeah, sure. I've got it up on my screen, just a still from at the moment. This is something I made a long time ago now, I think about 15 years ago.
Wow.
And it was an ad that I made, first of all, just for myself. I went out around where I was working in London with a camera and shot people signing their name in the air, and then created this kind of effect that sat on top that made it look like their signature was lingering in the air. And this is, nowadays something you see a lot of, but back then it was kind of rare. And what made it interesting was that it was linked to an idea. It wasn't just signing your name in the air. It was about Amnesty International, about the fact that your signature has a kind of power.
Yeah.
And I made it. I went out and shot some people doing it, literally just grabbed people on the street and said, can you sign your name in the air? And some said, go away, and some did. And then I put it on YouTube. And about 6 months later, Amnesty got in touch and said, we would love to make this into an ad for Amnesty in Ireland. We'd like you to, do this again for us. So I grabbed a friend who was a cameraman, and we went to Dublin, and we spent a couple of days with some film students in Dublin doing the same thing, going around and asking people to sign their name in the air. And we turned it into this commercial, this 30-second spot. It was then, I got invited to a film premiere where they showed it. They showed it at the premiere of The Boy in Striped Pajamas. And it was just a tremendously positive experience from start to finish. And I guess, gave me confidence that I could then, I could carry on doing this kind of work.
Yeah.
You asked kind of how it made me feel. I mean, it made me feel really good, but it also put me in a slightly unusual position for the time, which is that I knew I wanted to be a person who had ideas and executed those ideas. I didn't just want to be someone who worked in a studio executing someone else's ideas. And at the time, motion graphics hadn't really become such an industry that it is now. And I think what it is now, you can be that person. You can be an inventor, a creative, and an executor, and even a technical person all at once. But back then it was tricky, and I found it hard to move from that into the next thing. I certainly wasn't about to become a big commercials or pop video director at the time. So I had to find clever ways to kind of work my way through the industry.
Amazing. And we have a question here from Andraj asking about, of course, your work at the mill. So let's dive deeper now into your journey at the mill. Is there something that you worked on that resonated with you the most?
I think so.
I might know that answer, but I will.
I'm going to pop something up on my screen now. Is a project we did just about a year and a half ago for a news station called Al Jazeera. They're based in Qatar. And this was their English channel. And they asked us to make some idents for them that kind of highlighted their channel values. So it was a really great opportunity to do what I was talking about before, where it was kind of, have an idea, kind of come up with the whole concept right from the start, pitch it to them, and then take the whole thing right through to completion. And they were a wonderful client to work with. We kind of, at the mill, we got together with our brand team, and we have a strategy team in there. So when we pitched the idea to Al Jazeera, we'd already kind of got to know their network really well and kind of figured out what it was about their brand that they would really enjoy. By the way, this animation is on the mill website, so go have a look if you like. And yeah, they let us make these 5 idents where basically we used the natural world to represent the sort of 5 channel values that they felt were significant to them. And so in each one, the kind of natural world is a sort of metaphor for the real world, people and the way people interact. So there's things like diversity, which is the one on my screen now, which is this idea that everyone is unique, every voice is different, and you need to hear all of them together to understand, what's really happening in the world. So people are like grains of sand, they're all unique. There's another one about how ideas pass from one person to another. And we did that in an underwater landscape where we had kind of a swirl of current that made different objects kind of move together. And just, give you an idea of how something like that gets made. That was a really small team. There were about 4 motion design artists. Each one of us grabbed one of these films and kind of went with it. And then we had a few people supporting us, additional artists kind of helping out, and compositors and whatnot. But it was a very kind of personal, wonderful job. And we just found out last week it just won a few awards in New York. So we're very pleased about that.
Amazing. Congratulations. It is a beautiful, beautiful project. And, it's what you mentioned in the beginning, that your main inspiration is from nature and from the outside world, basically. So we can definitely see that in these idents. Talking about this project being a small teamwork, right? You mentioned in your talk that the biggest satisfaction in your work is that it's always a collective experience, which is something we truly believe in Adobe. The love of working on shared experiences and producing work, not just to deliver the project, but also to kind of like the whole journey of working with your team members. Can you elaborate more on this thought and share an example of how do you succeed at doing what you do through your work?
Well, I think one thing you learn when you start to work in a studio is the power of working with a team
Yeah.
and with groups of people. And at a company as large as the Mill, often you're joining someone who you've never even met before. You're
Mm-hmm.
picking up in your team, and you usually have that kind of confidence in a place like that anyone that you encounter is going to be so good at what they do that they're just going to make it better. And it's a quite a liberating feeling when you realize that you can just leave something with somebody and know that they're going to make it even better. But also, of course, the idea that you can't even concepts need to be bashed around between people. You need to tell people what your idea is, and then you need to listen to them as they tell you all the problems with it.
Yeah.
And hopefully they're nice and you trust them, and that all comes together and you end up making something better for it because you've kind of challenged it. And this is something I've tried to explain to people a lot, is this idea that an idea isn't necessarily going to be a success just because it's a good idea. You have to challenge it, try it, try to turn an idea into a film or whatever, and you're always going to come up against problems. So it's the journey you take with it and how the team responds to those things. And the better people learn to speak to each other about and trust each other, the better the job is always going to be.
Beautiful advice. I totally agree. Talking about challenges, artists in general, we always face challenges, all kinds of sorts. But in your case, it was quite a big one. And the story of you overcoming the disability that you mentioned in your Max session and finding solutions rather than barriers was extremely inspiring. And I guess we have so many questions about that. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you was that what was the biggest learning from your experience that you'd like to share with the audience, as a learning experience of how you overcome your story?
Well, first of all, just to explain in case people didn't see it, I was talking about the fact that I have a learning disability that makes it pretty much impossible for me to do anything really crafted with my hands. So I very much rely on computers and things like that to make images. And for a long time when I was young, prior to computers being able to do what they can do now, that meant that I really couldn't make images. So I kind of looked at other things. Like I got really into music for a long time and making music. I just always wanted to kind of create stuff. And I have to say, I was really lucky because even though that was a long time ago and these things were hard to get access to, I did have access to them. And this is, and I'll blow Adobe's horn here. Adobe, when their applications first came around, it opened up millions of doors for people like me, because it just meant, with a little bit of money, not tons, you could access this really powerful tools to make digital art. As far as kind of, how you get around the challenges, I think in hindsight, what I'd say is the challenge actually became, or the difficulties actually became what allowed me to become something unique, or something, that was me rather than copying somebody else doing what they do. Because I think if I had the chance when I was little, I would have very happily just redrawn what other people were drawing. But the challenge became the opportunity. And I know that sounds really hard to accept. And I think even if I were in the middle of a really difficult time, I'd turn around to someone who said something like that to me and be like, shut up. But actually, it did. And, the fact was that I couldn't do something the way everybody else did. So I had to do it the way I wanted to do it. And eventually that became something that meant I had a particular skill that made me a little bit different. And I'm really, like I said, I'm really grateful that these tools were around, because without them, I think I'd probably be doing a job that I hated.
I love this. The challenge became the opportunity. I hope, all these young talents watching us now or that will watch us in the future can also take this as, as an advice for their career. Really,
So.
yeah, this is amazing, Will. And I guess, we can talk forever, but I wanted to use, our short time to also ask you about the comment you mentioned in your Max session, which is, it's really hard to bridge the gap between 3D and real media. How did you find that balance in your work?
Yeah, and I think, for me, a lot of people would say, well, why would you bother? Like, if 3D makes stuff that looks unique and digital and interesting, why try to make something that looks like the real world? And I respect that. I think in my case, I always had that kind of insecurity that if I wasn't making something that looked like real media, then why should, then it's not good enough. And I really admire people who don't care about that at all and just make digital art, and that's the virtue of it. But yeah, I mean, it is really difficult to craft things using digital tools that feel like they're from the real world, and that takes first and foremost a really good understanding of what's actually happening in the real world, what things really look like. And for most people, that involves a bit of training in art or just training in like how to see the world. And I'm very lucky at the mill. I have people around me who are amazing at this and can look at an image and spot instantly the problem with it. Maybe it's an issue of scale or light or color. So that's kind of one side of it. Like you have to make things look like they're from the world. You have to be a bit of a student of the world, not just how people are, but go around and look at the world and see how things really do look. The other thing for me was like I really wanted to make stuff that looked like art that had been made, by someone with a brush. So, one of the things I did was go out and make. I'm just putting up on my screen. A tool that allowed me to kind of simulate paintings because I always wanted to make paintings. So, but I couldn't do this. Like when I had got my hands around some oil paints, you better look out because it's going to end up everywhere, but in the right place on the canvas. So this is something, a 3D tool that I've made. So it's like a digital tool that kind of it mimics the real world feel of paint. So this is how I did it. I just I pushed and pushed and pushed until I made something digital that to me looked like it wasn't digital. And I remember posting it a few things on Twitter or somewhere, and somebody going, you're probably going to find it still easier to do this as an oil painting. And I just said, no, this is how I want to do it. So I made this tool it works in Houdini, and it actually you can, if you want, you can make paint strokes or you can feed images into it, and it will actually figure out kind of where the paint strokes should go if an artist really made them. And then you can decide kind of how wobbly you want it to be and how abstract and how realistic you want it to be. These are my children, by the way.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so that's kind of how I approach that.
And can people get access to the resources or these tools? How can they, if they can, how can they do that?
Yeah, sorry, my monitor's just died, so I'm actually switching it off and on again. So I can't see anything at the moment. I developed this in something called Houdini. It's a piece of software, and the tool itself is called Stroke It. And I'm not thrilled about this, but I decided to sell it. So it's something you can purchase on Gumroad. But it's not just a tool, it's a kind of a learning tool as well, because it contains within it all like notes that say how everything works inside there.
Amazing, lovely. So many things that, your work at the mill, your personal projects, and, I think like how do you manage work life with personal life and the life out there and all the challenges that we're going through? Any tip to share with the audience?
Well, first thing I'd say is I think I've been struggling as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been really fortunate that the company I work for has muddled through this without too much of a headache. But I think I've been working from home for a year and a half. Mm-hmm. This is the my son's bedroom behind us. And we've all had to learn how to work, how to communicate without being in the same room with people. Mm-hmm. And time management's become extremely difficult. Like, how do you, how do you switch off? When do you say, like, that's it, I'm done for the day? Do you like just shut the door to the room you're working in and then go into another one and say, I'm finished? That's all been really difficult. And I really have, I'm aware of people who've found it easier than me and aware of people who found it harder. And I feel quite lucky that it hasn't been that difficult. And I do say I do struggle with maintaining the work-life balance, especially because I like to carry on doing my own things outside of normal work hours, which often means that my family think that I work all the time.
Yeah, great advice. I hope everyone takes that advice, because it is important to take some time for yourself and like you said, putting some boundaries, we can be pretty obsessed with work sometimes. So that's good.
Yeah.
And Will, in your talk, you mentioned that this is actually your third career, right? The mill.
Yeah.
Well, you also mentioned that it's never too late to try something new. And in fact, in the chat today, we had a question from someone that, they're 44. Is it too late to start in 3D? So, what is your advice on that? And at the same time, what is one advice that resonated with you and you'd like to share with the creatives out there who want to embark on a new career, whether they're 44, whether they're 18 years old, but or even changing career path. So
Yeah. I mean, I think in my case, I always felt like I didn't have a choice. Like I just had to move. I had to do something new. Otherwise, I was going to go crazy. And I guess, I took some leaps of faith at times, and my family sort of went, "You're crazy. What the hell are you doing? You just bought a house, signed up to a huge amount of debt, and now you're telling us you're not going to do that job anymore." But I felt like I didn't really have much of a choice. I had to try to do something differently, or I would burn out. I think the most important piece of advice was something that I wish someone had given me, but I eventually had to kind of figure it out myself, is that when you're not the age of someone who's just starting out and you want to change careers, you have all kinds of, concerns about things like, am I starting again? Are they going to make me pay? Are they going to pay me what they wanted to pay someone who's, half my age? And what I've realized over the years, watching myself change careers and watching other people do it, is that just because you're moving into something that's a bit new to you doesn't mean that the stuff that you did before doesn't count. Everything that all the experience that you've collected over the years matters. And your maturity and your ability to, to rely on past experiences to help you get through new things is so valuable. And I see this, where I work now, is that there are young people who are brilliant artists, but they need help learning how to manage their time, how to deal with clients, how to deal with stress. And, those things, as someone who's more mature, you already bring to the job, and you'll slot in pretty quickly. There's things you're going to have to learn, but, everything that you've done before then counts. And don't let anyone tell you that it doesn't. Don't let someone say to you, "Oh, well, just because you're older, don't think you're going to get paid any more than someone who's 22. That seems totally unfair. You've earned, the right to be paid as someone your age, and you must hang on to that.
Fascinating. I love this. It's like spot on. So I hope everyone takes the advice really, really carefully. So we have a couple of minutes left. So let me use this to ask you a very general question that might take hours of discussion, but what would be your first answer to it? Like, what do you think the future of digital art is?
Yes. That's my answer.
That's the answer.
I think that the trend I'm noticing across all digital art is it's becoming less one way. So, you take filmmaking, commercial making, pop videos, still imagery, whatever. Not that long ago, it was you made it, you put it out there, and you just hope people like it, and maybe someone that you'd hear back from them. Maybe you'd meet someone at a conference or online or something like that. It's much more two-way now. And, I think we've seen that over the last several years with events like this and like off, and online, forums, channels, Discord, Twitter, all these things where people are constantly feeding back on art. And just yesterday I gave my talk, and then after the talk I had, a bunch of people online contact me saying this and that about the talk. It's not just like you kind of broadcasting out to the world anymore. It's going both ways. And so, I'm really interested in making, sort of data-driven art, which is like art you can stand in front of and it will change basing on the things you do or information around you. And of course, everything that we hear about in advertising these days is metaverse or interactive or virtual reality or something like that. The whole idea behind that, and the reason it's so popular with the people who are with the advertisers, is because they're hearing back from you. They're, you're getting involved with them, and better or worse, they're learning a lot about you. Hopefully, things you want them to know about you. So that's where I think it's going. Is things aren't just one way anymore. And I really hope, sincerely hope that's always for the better. I think we have to protect that though.
Love it. You know, it's always the community. I mean, it's like, it's what you mentioned, like if it's bringing back to the community and, you know, collaborating and making it like a whole journey together, because it's not just one artist creating. But yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful having you, Will. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our session, but fortunately we got to, you know, cover some topics from your talk. If anyone missed Will's session, you can still watch it on demand on max.adobe.com. Thank you so much, Will. It's been amazing having you.
Thanks.
I hope to see you again. And yeah, thank you everyone who joined us in the chat. Have a nice Max day and see you soon. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.